All right, this is an on-the-record review of appeal of Planning and Development Council pertaining to a conditional use permit for a campground. Not really a campground, it's got so many different definitions in it as you read through there. Properties in Lava. So, any concerns? I never saw her complaint or filing. It wasn't in here.
So quickly by introduction, Hal Jensen, Planning Director, Tristan Burkwan, Assistant Director, and Elise Foster, Assistant Planner. All of us had involvement in preparation and conversation, so I invited both of them to be with me in case there's items that I tend to overlook. This was appealed based upon the fact that a statement was made in addition to consultation from Lava Rural Fire District and the DEQ, the Lava Hot Springs EMT EMS services should be consultant. It says the attached detailed narrative. Also, there was no mention of how Mr. Scadden will dispose of trash refuge. These also should be part of the decision in determining if CUP 22-6 aligns with the county's responsibility to protect health, safety, and welfare of the people and land that will be impacted by the proposed campground. Real quickly, in the deliberations by council, all of these particular items were discussed. The greatest concern is the fact that it's a private road, and the private road is probably partially to standard and not to standard. Okay? The rec zone has gone from being a rec zone recreational area to now people building permanent residences, and so those people that are quote-unquote permanent are disturbed by the fact that people use a private road with their four-wheelers in and out, up and down, screaming around, etc. All of the items that Mrs. Wellard cited, the council deliberated on all of those items and found them to meet the intent of the ordinance. The item that is stated about disposal of trash was described by Mr. Scadden in his application that it will be a private community dumpster, and it will be under contract for them to take care of the dumpster, whether they do it twice a week, once a week. That is not in our purview as the planning and zoning department. It's not necessarily, well, it's just not in our ordinance. We don't tell people how to dispose of their trash. So anyway, it is a campground. There are particular items that they discussed that they would like to do. We've had a particular conversation that they can't use trailers in the campground and leave them there year-round. That's a violation of the building code because it's defined as a temporary structure, which is only good for 180 days. If they were to move trailers on site, those trailers would then have to be permitted as a permanent structure with a permanent foundation. So we've had those conversations about their approach to how they want to develop this glamour camping, is a good way to put it. So
Talking about foundations.
Yes.
If they're permanent foundations and the A-frames are on a gravel bed?
No, those we described that everything would have to be basically done to a permanent structure.
Okay.
So they would basically be, for lack of a better description, which I don't think it meets the definition, but it would be, for convenience of conversation, tiny homes.
So
Okay.
the yurt would be on a permanent foundation if they choose that structure?
That is correct. Yep.
Yeah.
Anything that they do, if they want to leave it year-round, are required to meet the building code.
And the precast that they talked about wouldn't meet the building code on the...
Potentially, we would have to go down that path with them and assess whatever they submit against the building code, or even in the building code, as well as the zoning ordinance, there's the definition of temporary structure, which is 180 days or less. Our ordinance and the building code match each other.
Okay. Because conversation, I mean, as I read through there, the conversation that the board had kind of said permanent structures and answered some of them things, but I just wasn't sure, as I read through all of that, that the people, the applicant, kind of understood everything that was being said.
I think the applicant at this point understands going forward, he has more legwork to do with our office if the conditional use permit is upheld and granted.
And that's what it looked like, that, I mean, there was good conversation with the board, but it looked to me like your office was going to have more extensive conversation. And it's in the proposal when they made the motion.
That is correct.
That they have to follow all that, and and you guys commented about it. Normally on those two lots, they'd have one building permit, one on each one, right? But this allows them to do 6 because of the conditional use.
That is correct.
And that's kind of odd to me, I mean.
So, Tristan Borkman, Planning and Development, the difference is one single-family dwelling versus a conditional use permit allowing temporary residence, rental type situations in the recreational zone, so.
And as I read through this, it almost sounds like this is the first phase. Is there any conversation about that? I mean, putting a permanent resident on it or doing any of that kind of stuff. Was there any of that conversation?
I don't believe the applicant ever had conversation with any staff about other future plans.
Yeah, I mean,
There was.
you see how I tagged everything. There was one where he says, well, at this stage of it, at this stage of it, just kind of caught my eye. Well, what's your future plans then? I mean, we can't keep adding more and more up there.
So the conditional use permit, I believe our conversation was that you would have 3 spots that would have 3 camping units, so a total of 9. Okay?
Okay, and that's not what it says here now.
Where's the findings?
There was that conversation, but I did not. The other item that was discussed was relative to having a caretaker, and who is going to be the caretaker.
So the caretaker, the way I read that with Ernie, is the caretaker would take one of the 9, if that's the right number.
That is correct.
Okay. My question was, while I was looking for that enforcement, how do we enforce if they don't do things appropriately? Going back to the foundations and only 6 months.
So they won't get any building permits. They won't get excavation and grading permits unless they comply with ordinance, and they can't go do work without a permit of any kind.
Okay.
And so that's how we end up enforcing that they comply with the conditional use permit. In relation to hours, noise, that would be a noise complaint that would go to the sheriff's office.
Yeah, no, I wasn't concerned about that. I was just, if they don't build a structure appropriately, how do you guys enforce that if?
And that's taken care of through the building process.
Okay. Okay.
And permitting and construction process.
And then the other
And the
issue-
code enforcement process if they were to try to move forward without a permit.
Okay. And then on the locked gate on the private road, I didn't read all that or how that was going to be resolved going forward.
So, Commissioner Huff, that is a situation that has arisen with the sale of the property to a new property owner
Yep.
who either is not aware or chooses not to honor previous arrangements and agreements. So that said, that would be a civil issue that at some point we would need to push code enforcement as well as involve county legal to make sure that those people that were told by planning and zoning under a previous agreement, this road will be open, you will provide keys to these gates so people can use that road and have a second means of egress in the event of an emergency. And that's an item that in my mind is separate of this.
Yeah, No, I just, since
So
it was
we'll
well
have
up, I
to
was
go
just
down that
curious.
path, probably from the civil aspect, and involve county legal to make the new property owner aware of he will need to
So
respect.
theoretically, there should be a deed thing that says you will do this, or was it one of those Wild West handshake deals?
It
And
might be a Wild West handshake. Not sure.
okay.
Commissioner, going back to the conditional use permit, they have, under our ordinance, 6 months to get a permit, right? And if they don't do it, then it lapses. Now, they can get an extension from the planning director after 6 months, or at the time they get the conditional use permit, it can be extended for a long period of time. But if they don't get the permits within that time limit, then the conditional use permit goes away.
Sure.
And then just for clarification, page 65 of your packet is where those conditions of approval are from council, and the fifth one is development shall be limited to 3 campsites with 2 structures each, so 6.
With 2, okay, 6.
6, okay. That's what,
Yeah.
because it went back and forth. Started out with 3, and then they were gonna have tent pads and RV deals, and they went away from the RV pads, and they were 2 permanent structures, is what's gonna be on each campsite.
So going back, Commissioner Moser, relative to your concern, I'm being very subjective and making a supposition. In that comment that one of the applicants made, I believe they would like to see how this goes together and how this potentially cash flows, and if it actually pans out for them and works. And if so, then they would, I'm assuming they would come back to us and want to amend or basically apply for a new conditional use permit to change that from 3 campsites with 2 to adding an additional unit at each of the campsites for a total of 9, or maybe 2 more for a total of 12. But at this point, I believe they're testing waters to find out just how far they can go.
So, and I guess that was part of my question is, it's not gonna become a regular campground. I mean, so that they go A, B, C, D, E, F, and then add, 8
Yeah.
sites in each one. I was thinking of Buffalo Campground up in Island Park type deal. And if I'm the neighbor there, that's not the intent. I mean, you don't want it to be a Utah weekend getaway.
Well, and that's what they want it to be with the 6 that they're applying for, basically. So therein lies the concern, is the amount of traffic, additional traffic. If you have 6 additional units with 1 or possibly even 2 cars for campground, you've now got 12 additional cars in and out of that, going up and down that road, etc.
And is it a county-maintained road?
No, it's private.
So that Pine Drive, that is a private road?
Correct.
Okay.
All roads are private on this particular application, in and out, even the second means of egress.
There's no winter maintenance, no nothing.
Wow.
It's, what is it, 4, 5, 6 month summer home
Access, yeah.
area,
Unless you have a snowmobile.
unless you have a snowmobile, which, I'm just telling you that when we had BOE, I'm sure we can go back and look, and half these names are on there because the property isn't worth anything, because you can't get into it in the winter unless you have a snowmobile, it doesn't have water. That's one thing I will say, that the applicant says that they're gonna provide the water,
Yes.
but he says he's gonna get the water from the community well at the bottom of the hill, which isn't his well, it's the other subdivision or other people's well. So, to me, that was a bad answer, because, yeah, you're gonna haul water in, but so does everybody else, but you're still getting your water, you don't have your own well, your water's still coming from.
As a comment, Commissioner, I would say that probably, well, more than 50%, in many of those subdivisions, more than 50% haul their water. So,
And we heard that in BOE, I promise.
So today was basically just to bring us up to speed, if this, because we do have it,
For us to uphold,
I didn't see it noticed as an action item. Did I miss that? It is?
It's an action item.
Oh, all right.
And that's what we're doing, is upholding the land use board. And then they have the ability to appeal
Yeah.
further, and then they have the right to come in and talk on the second appeal.
Correct, okay.
Yeah, okay.
Further questions?
It's an on-the-record appeal, so that means the only thing the commission can consider is what was placed in front of the council.
It's right here.
Yeah. So, given the information that we've had to review, Mr. Chair, I make a motion that we uphold the Planning and Zoning Council's decision as presented.
We have a motion. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All right. Look forward to the next step.